Welcome to African Women in Sports Initiative Virtual Forum. Today, we are discussing understanding gender based violence, prevention, protection, and redress. My name is Tega Onojaife, and I am a sports presenter from Nigeria. This is an amazing forum for women from all across Africa, women in sports, to make a difference through their sports. And on today's discussion, we have a plethora of experts, women in leadership, women at the top of their game, coming to discuss this issue that has plagued women in the community and especially women in sports for the past few years. So, on our panel today, we have Dr. Miriam Mel Osime Mpala. She is the president of African Women in Sports Initiative. Welcome, Doctor. How are you feeling this evening?
Great, great. Thank you so much, Tega, for the kind words. I'm very excited and looking forward to this beautiful discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you for setting up this platform because it's an amazing opportunity for women. We'll be talking about all of that as we go along on the program. Let's also welcome today to the platform Diana Watila. She is CEO, Gender Protection and Implementation Advocate in Kenya. Welcome, Diana. How are you doing?
I'm doing well today. Thank you for hosting us. Happy to be here.
All right. We'll be drinking from your well of knowledge today because we really need to understand what is going on in our society and in our sports with women. Also, all the way from Ghana, let's put our hands together. Yes, we always have to do that. For Dr. Yera Luboito, she's a lecturer at the University of Education in Ghana, and she's also part of the Gender Commission for Ghana Basketball. Welcome to the show, Dr. Yera.
Thank you, Tega. I'm glad to be here.
Wow, it's great to have you. Also, all the way from Botswana, where we are not hearing so much great news, but we are glad that she can make out the time to be here. Secretary of Women's Commission for Botswana Hockey Association, Irene Jeremiah, is joining us on the show. Irene, welcome, and hopefully you are safe and protected from the elements.
Good evening, ladies. We are having, I wouldn't say we are safe. The situation is quite unstable. But I'm happy to be here with you guys, learning and taking everything that is happening in our lives, uh, talking about gender-based violence from different angles in the conflict. Thank you very much, and I'm hoping to learn more from you guys. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. We're hoping to learn from you too. All right. Also, we have to introduce all the way from Kenya. She's the president of Systemic Family Therapy Association. She also works in the State Department for Sports. Her name, Patricia Awisi. Patricia, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. I look forward to a powerful session.
All right. So one more time, let's just run through what we're talking about at the Africa Women in Sports Initiative GBV Virtual Forum. Today, we are talking about gender-based violence, understanding gender-based violence, its prevention, protection, and redress. And to help us through this, I know everybody thinks that they know what gender-based violence is, because as soon as they say it, you automatically can think of a situation or a story that you've read. But let's academically and psychologically go through this situation so that we understand in depth what this really means. And to help us through that, she is a lecturer at the University of Education in Ghana, and so I'm sure she's going to break it down for us. But let's invite Dr. Yera Koboito to tell us from the layman's point of view, what is gender-based violence?
Okay, thank you, Tega. I think basically when we talk about gender-based violence, we are looking at any form of violence or any form of abuse that is targeted at someone because of their gender. Now, these things usually can happen to just about anyone, no matter your age, your socioeconomic status. If it happens to you, how do you even identify it? Now, they can come in different forms. So you can have physical violence, which is the most common one that everybody is able to relate to. But then there's also emotional and psychological violence, where there might be some form of intimidation, there might be some form of control, there might be some form of threats to someone's life and all of that. And then we could also talk about sexual violence. That is also very common as well. And then we could also look at gender based violence from an economic point of view, where somebody uses your financial status against you. They hold it against you such that based on whatever is happening to your finances, you will give in to certain things that you normally would not. Now, all of these
Mm.
usually come about when we don't know our ways around, when there is a sort of power imbalance. So it's like you have to lay down in front of someone to gain something. Now, if you want to gain the thing, then most of the time you are pushed to do things you would normally not do. And usually that is what brings about this gender based violence.
All right. And that is Dr. Yera. She has given us the different types. So let's go over all the way from Ghana to Kenya. I like the way we are moving from country to country. Let's go all the way from Ghana to Kenya. Let's talk to Patricia Awisi because as president of Systemic Family Therapy Association, she understands, the psychology and the effects this gender-based violence has on people. So let's start with you. What is gender-based violence? What's the psychology behind it? What's the situation,
Mm,
really?
okay. So as Yeira said, gender-based violence is any harmful act that is directed to an individual based on their gender. There are different kinds of gender-based violence. There's physical, sexual, psychological, financial, and the gender-based violence is rooted in inequality. Inequality, which is societies that especially societies that prioritize sometimes male dominance, make it easier for them, for the men to seem like the superior gender and abuse the women. Gender-based violence is also rooted in power dynamics. This shows up a lot in intimate partner violence, where the one partner feels dominant and has control, and to get this control, they use violence to dominate their partner. It is also rooted in social norms, culture, and when I say culture, it's some traditions like child marriages or honor killings that these societal and cultural norms or practices um, reinforce gender-based violence. Gender-based violence is not just men to women; it can also happen in the other way around. It can also be women to men. Mostly, it happens in different parts of the country or different parts of the world. Uh, One is more superior than the other. Gender-based violence is a human rights violation, and it is something that should be spoken about loudly. We try and curb it from where it begins. And as a way for us to curb it is to unlearn the ways that the norms that the society has put, some of the cultural practices, um, and the inequalities that are there between the men and the women. And then that way, the power dynamics change, and we can reinforce equality, that both genders are equal and deserve to be in the same spaces as much as the other gender does. Thank you.
All right. So you touched a little bit on something I wanted to look at when you said um, cultural based gender based violence, and so based on the culture of people in certain areas, certain things are allowed. Um,
Mm,
I'm still going to come back to you on that, but I just want us to talk about policies and laws that may seem not to even be in favor of women. So, for instance, a few days ago, we're talking about it in Nigeria. Like I said, country to country, we're talking about it in Nigeria, and there is no such thing as marital rape provision for it in the law. So, how do we start to address these issues? Well, Patricia, I'm coming back to you because you spoke about the cultural stuff. Yeah. So
Okay.
how do we begin to address it within this kind of things where the law doesn't categorically say, so
That
sometimes
it
a,
is.
a young girl is getting
Mm,
married, to say her
mm,
father's death, and there are no laws protecting that. There's no laws protecting women even inside marriage. How do we start
yeah.
to tackle that?
I would say by psychoeducation, psychoeducating people and having forums like this where you're passing information and letting them people know what is right and what is wrong. Just because there is no specific law that governs around as a specific cultural norm, it doesn't mean that it is morally or ethically right. An example that you've given is of marital rape. Many people don't know, they don't understand what marital rape is. And because it is church, from your religion, from your culture, then the conversations have been when your partner asks for it, you give it. There's no saying no. And you saying no, it looks, um, you're the one who's done the wrong thing, yet that's not how it is. I would say a lot of psychoeducation and teaching especially the younger generation from when they are young, we unlearn what we were taught, we unlearn it and teach the younger generations better. Something like, and speaking about these things openly, in open forums like this, in schools, in churches as well, about what gender-based violence is, what marital rapes look like, what assault is, what sexual harassment is. Even being catcalled on the street is sexual harassment. But because we haven't educated people enough to know what the different kinds of harassment, then you don't know that something wrong is happening to you. So I would suggest this is a good beginning and we continue psychoeducating them.
All right. Thank you so much, Patricia. We've not even started and we've already started to delve into some of the issues. I can see a comment here all the way from South Africa saying that that is so rampant in South Africa. So even if it's in Nigeria, it's touching everywhere in the continent. We're going to go over now. Okay, from Patricia in Kenya, we are going to go over now to Diana Watila in Kenya. And she, like I said before, she's the CEO of Gender Protection and Implementation advocate she's an advocate all the way in Kenya. Now let's talk to Diana. Diana, we have this. Let's understand basically this gender-based violence. I know you have a great presentation to give us. So can you run us through your presentation on what you have on gender-based violence, and we take it from there.
Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity. I'll run through my presentation. A lot of my colleagues have already picked on many of the issues, and for us, gender-based violence is a very serious issue, and we are seeing that it is happening now in sports, and you find that women who are very powerful in the field are not exempt from gender-based violence. Traditionally, you'd find maybe it's the people living in the informal settlements and low-income housing, but this actually it's happening to everyone. So it shows that we are not safe. And the GBV, gender-based violence in sports, it arises from the inequities in sports. You find that there's less investment and media coverage. There's reported cases of gender-based violence. We've all heard about the case that affected the US Olympic team, where a doctor was able to violate girls for very many years. And we find that women have limited leadership roles in sports. And you find that because of that, there are a lot of inequalities that allow the prevalence of gender-based violence. And I'll just briefly talk about what is gender-based violence. It's been noted, but it's basically it's a generic term, but it talks about there's gender-based violence affects both women and men, but you find women bear the brunt of gender-based violence. So my presentation will focus mainly as women who are affected and are survivors. And from what Patricia says, it causes psychological harm, physical harm, and suffering to women. We've spoken about how it's rooted in gender inequality, power imbalances, and harmful norms. And we've also talked about the manifestations. But what is more interesting is that there's now a new form of gender-based violence, that threats, harassment, sexual bullying, and abuse of power also occur online. And this violence can be committed by family, by friends, either by members of the communities, unknown assailants, and it can be perpetrated by institutions such as federations when they condone SGBV. Anyone can experience SGBV. And we need to understand there's a legal framework that protects women from sexually and gender-based violence. Let me start internationally. There's a convention on the elimination of all forms of discrimination against women, and it came into play in 1979. And it recognizes that gender-based violence impairs or nullifies the enjoyment of women of their human rights and fundamental principles. And then there's also a convention on the rights of the child. It protects children from SGBV. And there's declaration on the elimination of violence against women. So these are international obligations that can protect women from violence. There are many other places that women's rights are protected. There's the Sustainable and Development Goals. And you'd be happy to know that an Olympic Charter that was passed in 2025, it protects women from SGBV by preventing non-discrimination and the promotion of gender equality. Now, the Olympic Charter believes and it proposes that all athletes, all sports persons, whether male or female, within the sports ecosystem have a right to enjoy their human rights that they can get in other spheres. So if protection from sexual harassment is a right that is accorded to you in your normal day-to-day life, they recognize that that same right should be given to you in sports. Within Africa, we have the Maputo Protocol, and it's a very progressive legal instrument, and it prohibits states from allowing gender-based violence against their people. Locally in Kenya, where I am, we have a robust legal framework. I heard you talking about marital rape. Under the Sexual Offences Act, there's no crime of family rape, of marital rape, but we have a local Prevention of Domestic Violence Act that prevents rape in the home situation. So even if it's your husband who commits a sexual offense against you, it is now an offense. So one of the strategies that women advocates do, we advocate, you can slip in a law like that, and it normally will pass in parliament without people realizing. That's what we did in Kenya. Another key thing about our laws, they tackle the aspect of consent. When you're talking about sexual and gender-based violence, a very big question is consent. Most of the time, when sexual and gender-based violence happens, it happens in the privacy. And because of the issue of DNA, now a person cannot deny that they committed an offense against you. So there's the aspect of consent. And our law focuses on consent they'll find that you did not give consent if it was your consent was gotten as a result of fraud, or you are unable to consent. Let's say you are drunk. We also have a very interesting law under the Evidence Act where at times you might not have physical evidence to support your rape, but we have a provision in the Evidence Act says if you give your evidence in court and it's believable, the court can convict on the basis of your evidence. So that's a lot of work we
Oh,
have done. I'll just
yeah.
quickly run and talk about how gender-based violence affects people.
Okay, let's take it.
Gender-based violence is gender specific and can have gender-specific consequences. For example, a woman who's raped can get pregnant. Also, the hostility and harassment that we are seeing takes a very gender-specific form. They will insult you about your looks and your integrity. And we've talked that it gives you physical impact. There's also psychological impact and also social impact because you can be isolated. So quickly as I wind up, what are the strategies for prevention of dealing with SGBV? There's
Okay,
prevention,
so
that
before
means
you get there,
education.
Diana, before you get there,
Yes,
Diana, could you hold on for the prevention?
yeah,
Because I want to get to, since you have touched already on instances, let's go around and talk about a few instances. Because we do recognize, first of all, Dr. Yera is a gender commission on Ghana basketball, and you have spoken about the Olympic Charter. First of all,
yes,
that rights are available, but all these laws are passed internationally, and locally we still have cases of those things happening. In fact, in I think it was in Kenya that we had the Ugandan athlete set on fire, wasn't it?
yes,
Yes. So let's look at cases, a few cases. Because we have running out of time, let's look at a few cases. We are going to go to Dr. Yera in Ghana, and then we are going to come to Irene in Botswana, and let's talk about a few cases of. In fact, let's go to Irene first, because she literally wade through the water. She's Noah in Noah's Ark right now, just so that she can have this conversation about gender-based violence. So let's start with Irene in Botswana. Can you hear me? Can just let me hear your voice so that I know you
I
can hear me.
can hear you.
All right. So let's talk to
I
you
can hear
about
you.
gender-based violence in Botswana and what you are experiencing, and before we start talking about prevention.
Thank you. Thank you very much. There is a rise in gender-based cases in Botswana. From December and January have escalated number of rape, escalated number of GBV, a hotspot of gender-based violence. Despite having policies, that are in place, which I feel like there's still a gap. There's still a gap between policy implementation, policy monitoring, and evaluation. So I'll say that Botswana is actually uh, facing a crisis in gender-based violence. Children are being killed every day. Just today, we have a disturbing video circulating on social media where a woman was literally butchered by her boyfriend. So we are in a hotspot and we are a red hotspot for gender-based violence in Botswana, and we are literally trying to see how we can go on about it, because if it's like this in the whole community, imagine the number of people who have not reported. Because right now we are only focusing on the reported cases. What about those people that have not reported?
In the
What about
rural
those
areas.
unknown? Thank you.
Okay. All right. So can we just quickly move to Ghana, where Dr. Yera is there, and we are talking about a few pointers about the gender-based violence. You work in the Gender Commission for Ghana Basketball. Let's talk about some few cases before we go back to Diana for prevention, protection, and redress. I think, Doctor, you have to
About
mute your mic. Yes. Okay.
okay, yeah. I think usually when we hear gender-based violence, we think sexual offenses, but I think predominantly over here in Ghana, as a coach and as someone who works with the Gender Commission, most of the issues that we encounter are related to harassment and then threats, right? So they make sexual advances at these female athletes, and then when they do not give in to them, they begin to threaten them with they not being made to play the game that they are excited about playing, being the athletes that they are supposed to be. Now, usually also you would hear all forms of body shaming, when it comes to female sports. These days, most of the attire that we wear are being sexualized, kind of. And so you tend to find that people dress up a certain way. And then because of that, people tend to sexualize them. They call them names, like the cat calling comes in and all of that. And there are also incidents where there is verbal abuse. So there you find that if you compare male teams and female teams, there is a lot more verbal abuse towards female athletes than male athletes. Probably because if a coach is abusing a male athlete, they feel the person could retaliate, maybe in a physical fight or something, but the female wouldn't. And so you find those things being a lot more rampant within the female circles rather than in the male circles. Now, usually these things, if the athletes experience it at a very tender age, say in senior high school, by the time they get to the tertiary level, their self-confidence is tanked. And the saddest thing is if they are not able to overcome all of these psychological events at that tender age, they metamorphosize into a phase where they begin to accept the abuse. And that is where it becomes a problem. For somebody to accept to be treated
To accept
badly.
him. Yes. So let's
Exactly.
talk about this because we're missing a few things now because this starts from a really young age. Can I come to Dr. Miriam now? Let's talk about these things. So what is it? Do we now we have to talk about women in coaching, women in leadership, in administration, because those kind of things could help the situation when we are talking about abuse, especially for athletes. Because when you think about it, the coaches are men, and just like Dr. Yera has said, if they talk to other men, they'll feel like they're talking to other men. But when they're talking to girls, it's completely different. They don't feel intimidated, and so they can be as condescending as they want to be. Let's talk about this. Women in how do we do this? How do we tackle this? How do we need to get more women in leadership, more women in coaching? Let's talk about that.
Thank you very much, Tega. I'm very happy that we are actually having this conversation because I know that there's so much work that's already been done or going on when it comes to gender-based violence around the world and Africa especially. But there's still so much more that we can do. And I believe that at African Women in Sports Initiative, being able to embrace even just baby steps and begin with such conversations is also going to be able to play a part in trying to solve gender-based violence. And for that matter, I'm very happy to hear these conversations and also here to see that we have an audience and people tuning in to just listen to and contribute to the discussion. When it comes to women in leadership and how to deal with gender-based violence, I think one of the things I noticed is that in as much as we are going to make a lot of noise at the top. I think we need to begin from the bottom because, for example, I'll give just this so simple example. There are very many schools that have young girls playing football, young girls playing, different sports, and they employ male coaches to train these young girls. And if a young girl comes, maybe she's had her periods and she has cramps and she didn't come for training, and probably it will be very hard for this young girl to be able to talk to the coach and explain herself. And you will find that the performance of the team can go down because girls will not easily relate their issues to the coach who is a male. So I think that if we can begin by insisting or even creating policies that go down to the lower levels of sports, that we should implement policies like insisting on women coaches for being part of these teams that are for girls. I think that in that way then we can begin to change the narrative, because we can make so much noise at the top, but if down things are wrong, these young girls are the same ones that are going to grow up to become leaders. These coaches that are mentoring them, and they are not being able to give them the freedom to be able to speak about issues that are female related. So I believe that if we can do that, Tega, I think then we can be able to address all these other issues, because as we know it, gender-based violence is not just about the physical part of it or even the sexual part of it. Dr. Yara has talked about the subtle insensitive comments that that are sexist, that go on among teams, and it before you know it, the girls teams or the female teams have lost confidence, and then we are not able to perform at our best. So one of the
Yeah.
things that I can say is call it out. Yeah, do not see something going wrong in your community as a woman leader and keep quiet. It is your right to protect the ones who are below you. It is your responsibility to speak out. It does not really help to speak out in offices and in your community. Girls are struggling. You can see the obvious signs of young girls being groomed into sexual activities, and you're quiet about it. So for me, I would say, let us begin by, as women leaders, let us begin by looking at our homes. I know I talk to my sons a lot about that is a sexist comment, take it back. Let us begin by having those
Let's
conversations in
start
our
from there.
homes. Yes, it starts from there. And also, the other thing, Tega, that I would like to address is that as we are doing that, we also should not encourage it, because sometimes you are in a crowd and men will say sexist comments, and then we just laugh along, and we normalize the conversations. So if we can be able to speak out more often as we are dealing with issues of policies at the high tables, let us also do this in our conversations, our communities, our homes, our schools, and of course in platforms like this. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you so much. So Diana, let's come back to you now, because you work as a CEO of a gender protection and implementation services. So let's start from there. How do we start with? Let's talk prevention, protection, and then we'll go to redress. Let's start from there. How do we prevent?
Okay, so thank you very much. The first thing is education. I talked about the US gymnastics team and their challenges. These young girls were going for medical checkups. Their mothers were in the room. And it just took one of them to say, no, that touch did not feel medical. So we need to teach women and girls to recognize what is sexual and gender based violence. As it has been said before, we think about SGBV as the someone being snatched and raped in a bush, but it's wider. The second thing that I would think about is having a good complaints mechanism that is very accessible and trustworthy. Now, part of the challenges that we have faced within our jurisdiction, especially when we speak to our sportswomen, is they know what they're experiencing, but they don't have a place to turn, and that's why our committee was formed to support women to lodge their complaints, to work with federations to come up with complaint management systems. Can you imagine that you're going to complain that someone grabbed your breast, and when you go to the committee, it is just men? Will you trust that? Or if you're walking
No.
and having tea and someone comes to tell you, how did your case against John go? So we need to have a trustworthy complaint mechanism. Number three, we need to bring into place an independent investigation mechanism, because many of the perpetrators hold positions within the sports ecosystem or are friends to people. So it means that the investigation is not even, it's not trusted. And then we need transparency and accountability, meaning when complaints are made, they need to document, tell us the process, tell us who are seated in the committees and what is the outcome. This will prevent harassment, because we are dealing with cases where someone is uncomfortable and complains about their treatment. The next thing, they are isolated and they're not allowed to join the national team. So those are very good. Those are the few prevention mechanisms I can speak on before we go to protection. So back to you.
Okay. All right. So while we were talking, we have audience from around the world on across many social media platforms. We have on YouTube. We have on Instagram. We have on LinkedIn. I can see comments here. So let me just run through a few of the comments. Grace Hiraguri says, "My question is, on the believability and how the evidence is verified." We'll come back to Diana will help us answer that question. Fran Hilton Smith says sports like football, where men are coaches and managers in women's football, often pose problems. That's true. Regina Helen says ensuring that all federations, clubs, schools have a safeguarding policy in addressing gender based violence in place will go a long way in addressing this very critical issue. Stacey is loving the insights. Nandifa Nandi says, yes, education and awareness are powerful tools for creating positive change. And Grace Kiraguri is happy that we are talking about all these laws that are being put into place against sexual harassment, including marital rape. All right. Forgiven says one of the urgent needs is to provide a safe space for the silent majority who are suffering gender based violence in one form or another. This is because it often comes to the limelight when things are already out of hand. I'll be going through more of the comments as we go along. But since we started talking prevention and protection, let's go back right now to Patricia, who deals with this when we're talking about systemic family therapy. Patricia, how do we protect in this situation?
Um, in protecting the different genders from gender-based violence, as Diana had said, and I reiterate, is psychoeducation. So we begin from home. Charity begins at home. So we start from our homes, with our daughters and our sons when we are young, when they are young, as from as young as they can understand about how to speak up for themselves, how to protect themselves when what is wrong and what is right, what is moral, what is not, so that they're able to identify the different forms of abuse as they grow up. In schools as well, in schools, in churches, in our neighborhoods, places of work. One of us mentioned about creating policies around sexual and gender-based violence and also sexual harassment. It's easy for you to complain or to talk about something that you know what it is. So a lot of it begins from psychoeducation, and then understanding what this abuse does to you. We have being I am a trauma therapist, and we have big T's and small T's. Big T's are the impact, the big traumas, things that happen to you that impact your psychological well-being, as well as small traumas. And both these kinds of traumas impact your wellness, your emotional wellness, your general wellness, your mental state, which in turn influences how you perform at your work. So, for example, for the women and men in sports, if you are going through abuse, it is expected for you to not perform well. So to create a system where the sportsmen and women feel safe enough to come and speak about their personal issues, not to separate what happens at home and what happens at work with your performance at your job. To create, so the first one is psychoeducation. The second one is to create spaces where individuals feel safe enough to come and talk about the troubles that they're going through. Constant check-ins with individuals to see how well they are doing. Is anyone, are you being harassed, and reminding them what harassment is. As Diana had said, to create confidential ways to receive these complaints and also to do investigations. Part of the problems we've had, or part of the challenges that we've had, is about individuals who've gone through the trauma but are scared of retaliation or are scared of the repercussions that will come to them after they've reported it. But once we assure them that the information that you're collecting is confidential and it won't come, when as we are taking on the cases and we're helping them, we are going to protect them before we pass on this information, then they're more open to speaking about it. But more often than not, individuals who are going through abuse feel scared to even report it because they don't have any safe spaces. Those would be my two best ways as of now. We create a safe space, create policies, and also psychoeducation. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. Let's take some comments because there are questions here, and I think some of these questions will go to I will go to, let's see. This looks like a Diana question. She said, "How do we educate the support? How do we educate and I think and support the personal issue? Wait, so this is Natando Unlovu. I don't get this question. I think you're asking how do we educate and support personal issues. Basically, how can we women in sports be protected at home? Okay, so she's talking about how women in sports can be protected at home. So Patricia, I think that is your question. Um, Hold on to it. Grace Hiraguri says, my question is on the believability and how evidence is verified. So, Patricia, you answer Nasando's question, and she's saying, how can women in sports be protected at home? And then Grace Hiraguri's question is on the end of the believability and how evidence is verified. I think that should be Diana's question. So, Diana, you will answer Grace, and then um, Patricia, you will answer Nathan Lee. So let's start from there. Let's start from your answer, Patricia. How are women in sports going to be protected at home?
I will come back to the answer that I gave before. Psychoeducation. Once we have educated the sportsmen, women well enough about what their rights are, spoken against some of the cultural norms. And one of the ones that I can think of from the top of mind is that the man is the head of the house, and my money is his money, and he's the one to talk out to plan it and distribute it. Once we educate the women enough to show them that you and your husband are partners, not that the man is the leader and you follow. If we teach them well enough for them to understand that they are partners and I have a right to the money I have earned, how it can be used, and empowerment, then it's easier for them to stand up for themselves at home or to protect their wealth, to protect themselves in the house. Psychoeducation is the best bet on how to protect women, and
On how
again,
to do that?
to mm, mm, and
Yeah.
to
All
create
right.
safe
So
spaces for them to speak about it.
okay. Let's come to you, Diana, because
Yeah.
you are supposed you. you help us answer Grace's question of
Oh,
believability and how and verify evidences. Then we will come to you, Dr. Miriam, about the question here that Nasandu was asking. I didn't understand earlier. How can we educate the support personnel about these issues? All right. So that question can go around. Anybody can pick it. If you want to answer the question, please let me know. How can we educate support personnel on ground? So especially those working in associations. Dr. Yera, you're working in association, you can help us. Irene, Jeremiah, you can help us. Dr. Miriam, you can help us. But first of all, Diana, answer Grace's question and then we'll go around.
yeah. But I'll also touch a little bit on what Patricia spoke in terms of
Okay.
protection. Need to find out, are there safe houses near you that give protection to people from SGBV? You also need to, whenever you feel that you're in an unsafe place, believe yourself. You can go to the nearest police station. Number three, and it comes now to answer the question of believability. We have to know that there is no shame when gender-based violence occurs against you. You're not the person who's done anything wrong. You have been assaulted. Once we remove the shame, it means people will be free to report. And it comes to believability. I worked as an investigator in one of my previous jobs, and there's something called Locard's principle. There's always when you touch a surface, you will always leave something behind. So it means when gender-based violence happens against you, before it even goes to court, it starts at the reporting process. What evidence do you have? You take photos of the injuries. If it's sexual and if it's rape, you do not shower. You take the clothes that you are violated with, you go with them to the clinic, and also it'll be part of the investigation. You record your statement as soon as possible, and you also get your witnesses. One of the key things that is coming up is the issue of consent. There's a lot of intimate partner violence. You go for a date rape, but you're able to show that consent was withdrawn or consent was gotten fraudulently. Now, when the standard of proof in our criminal justice system, and I think it reflects in Commonwealth countries, this only applies to Commonwealth countries where we practice, it's beyond reasonable doubt. So they will rely on the evidence. And I also noted, like in Kenyan law, we have a provision in our Evidence Act because they recognize that SGBV happens a lot in private. They will look at your believability, meaning when you speak to the magistrate and the magistrate or the judge is convinced by your evidence, they can actually convict a person without physical evidence. So I think we need to lobby for such laws across the board. And as a lawyer, I'll tell you, there's no good lawyer or no bad lawyer. At times, you may lose your case, not because you're lying, but because the evidence may not be sufficient or the system might be compromised. So as I wind up, I'll say, if you believe anything that is happening against you, document, get witnesses, and that will boost your chances of your complaint being successful. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, so let's go back to that question earlier. Okay, before we go to the question, let me look at some comments here. Um, Kenya, somebody says, Joan Nicole says, also these gender-based violence cases should be verified in as much as we are creating safe spaces for women. There are also women abusers who take advantage of this, and the case becomes a blackmail ordeal. So that's what Joan says. Um, so let's go back to Nathando's question, where she says, "How can we educate the support personnel about these issues?" Because we need that. And then Patricia says, "What policies should sports federation and clubs implement to prevent gender-based violence? So those two questions, anybody can pick them up. Let's start with the question of education support personnel. Who wants to take that? Education
I,
support personnel.
I can
Diana,
take
can
that.
you take that first? Okay.
Yes. Now, I'll go back. I'll give a very brief story. When I was a young girl, you'd enter a vehicle, a public vehicle, and you, as a woman, you're squashed in, and you'd feel a man against you, or you'd be grabbed. Now, you would not go home and report it to your mother or police, because we knew that that was a normal part of life. But then now with education, I know that was actually violence. Now, we are not making excuses for men, but there are certain things that have been happening over and over again without accountability. So we need to educate both men and women of what comprises of SGBV. And how can we do that? In every federation, they have a structure, starting from the ground level to the highest. You don't just target the leaders, but you target even the grassroots, you target the people in school. You also have a safeguarding policy, and part of that safeguarding policy can include a commitment not to perpetrate GBV, but also that commitment should be tied to a contract, so that if someone perpetrates SGBV, they are knocked out. Another way of educating is the use of social media. That is that message goes around quickly. You can use TikTok, something that grabs people, and that will help you. Also, another form of education is a bit punitive, but also taking action and against the perpetrators and sharing the findings of why this person was held accountable. When people see the consequences, they will be able to now uphold and protect
Yeah.
women. The last thing is the use of male champions, where
Mm-hmm.
you train men on SGBV, and let them within their circles also be training men on the issues of prevention. We cannot have much traction if we don't involve men in the debate to prevent it from looking like he versus she. It should be a problem. They should not see women's rights or issues that affect women as something extraordinary in an agenda, but it should be streamlined in all activities, so that you don't have I attended a gender conference, and at the opening ceremony, there were many men, but by the time the sessions came, they had left. So how do we mainstream it as a main? How do you mainstream it as a main agenda? Because talking to women is equivalent of your husband having a headache, but you take the painkiller for him to feel better. It won't make any difference. He'll still have the headache, and you might have an overdose. Thank you.
That was a really good one. By the time the people that were trying to educate had vacated the arena. All right, so there's still a few more questions coming, and we'll try to wrap up as soon as possible because we're almost out of time. Um, so let's look at Nandifa Nandi. I think she's from South Africa. She says GBV, gender-based violence, can be in many forms, but what I know in the case of gender-based violence is form of emotional or psychological violence. What support can you offer first as a team manager? So she's asking if you sense gender-based violence in form of emotional or psychological violence, what support can you offer as the team manager? All right. So that's the first question. I think Abena Brown and Mr. says, should there be a chapter dedicated to focusing on ladies in federations and constitutions? Okay. So we are coming to you. Okay, doctor, you are going to talk to Abena, um, Dr. Yera,
I'll answer
because
the
it's asking. I'm going to come back to that question. But first of all, let's talk about as a team manager, how does she learn support? And I think we should ask the Family Therapy Association expert. Patricia, you know that's
Okay.
your question. They're coming to you.
Yes. Yeah. So, one of the ways that you can help immediately when when you notice your people are going through emotional or psychological distress or suffering like that, is to do psychological first aid. And psychological first aid is basically answering the question, how can I help? The needs, once you go through a trauma, the needs of every individual are very specific. Asking them, how can I help? And them telling you specific with something that they need. Sometimes there's someone who needs time away to go and figure themselves out. There's someone who says they want to talk about it. There's someone who says they need a hug. Someone will say they need a safe place to cry. Ask the question, how can I help? And let the individual guide you. For the people who don't know, who um are not able to structure what help they need, it is for us to figure out ways to help them. And that can be a quiet space to just be, to let them be. If they need to break down, allow them, be there for them as they are crying and they are breaking down, and protect them in that sense. If they need to talk about it, give them a listening ear, give them a comfort for them to speak about the challenges or the suffering that they are going through. If physical movement is a good way for individuals to relieve of their stress. A lot of the pain that we store it in our bodies physically. So you can take this person out on a walk, you can hug them. But for you to give that hug or to physically touch them, my suggestion or my advice would be to ask them. For someone who's been physically abused, they become very protective of their space. So you coming and hugging them without their consent also brings in some form. You remind them of the abuse that they went through. So as much as I'm suggesting giving them a hug, you ask first, do they want the hug? If they say yes, you allow it. Another way that you can support them is to validate their feelings. As investigations are happening and you're trying to figure out what exactly happened, who was the perpetrator, what can be done for them. In the moment, validate what they're feeling. So if one of your team members comes and tells you that they're sad, yes, I can see that you're sad, or I understand why you could be sad. Please let me know about it. Let me know more about what you're feeling and how best can I be of service to you. So in general, to summarize all that I have said is ask the question, how can I help? And then help them in the ways that they need, not in the ways that you feel is best. Thank you.
Oh, fantastic. Help them in the way that they need, not the way that you think they need to be helped. All right. So, Dr. Yera, I'm coming to you with this question. She's asking, should there be a
Tega,
chapter?
can I add something on that, on what Patricia said, please?
Okay. So, Dr. Miriam, please go ahead.
Yes. So I was just saying that maybe also, I don't know what Patricia thinks, but possibly it could be a good recommendation to have female leaders or female managers to take on certificates in counseling, so that they can be able to best help, their colleagues that are in such situations. And a certificate is not very cumbersome to do. So I think, I don't know what Patricia thinks, but I think it would be very, very important for federations to have female leaders take on, counseling as part of their empowerment programs that can be able to help us fight GBV and other issues that affect women. Thank you.
And another way of educating the people in the different sports field and the different federations is to do trainings and workshops on peer support. So before you get to if you're members of a team, before it gets to the team manager, if one of your members has training on peer support, you get support from the peer first. Then if we do it in tiered ways, so if your peer support is not enough, then you go to your team manager or the female leader who has a certificate in counseling. And if that is also not enough and they need more help, then now you go to the counselor or to the therapist to help. But tiered support is a good suggestion, Dr. Maria.
Okay. All right. So, So can we go to this question, Dr. Yera? I was talking to you about Abena's question, and she says, should there be a chapter dedicated and focusing on women in federations, constitutions to prevent gender-based violence? So basically, what you're saying is, should we have a chapter when we are talking about constitutions in federations? Should we have a chapter focused on women?
Okay. I think most federations have women's commission, like the Ghana Basketball Association. Maybe the women who are put in those positions should be more outspoken, because I don't think giving all the positions to women is even going to solve the problem. Because in this day and age where we have LGBTQ plus issues, even the women could be predators. And so it is important that, like, I think Diana mentioned that the men left the room. Now, all of us have to come on board. Having a chapter could help, where you have a desk which will take care of such issues on every federation, so that it is now creates a direct line of communication, a place where the athletes will feel comfortable to go to report such issues. And if their issues are reported and action is not taken, then that would also be something that is not working as well. And so it's important that if we, even if we have a chapter, it would be good, but zero tolerance will be the way to go. Address every issue, handle every issue, make sure everybody who is to be held accountable is held accountable, and create a direct channel of communication between the athletes and then whoever is in charge of such issues. Because it could happen to females. Gender is not just female, and so for males as well it could happen. But if there is a direct line where they could go through in communicating some of these issues, and if we are shy of talking about it, it will still be the elephant in the room. We'll never really get to talk about it. So I want to
True.
believe that even if there's going to be a charter, then it has to focus on creating these direct channels for every federation for reporting issues like this, and they would be able to handle it better, I guess. Thank you.
Yeah, I like this suggestion, but I also think one of the important things you said is that the men must be in the room. Because we cannot give all the
Yeah.
positions to women. It's not possible. The men must be in the room. So, like Diana said, as soon as they evacuated, maybe we should lock the doors next time we want to start this conversation. Just close the doors and keep everybody in there. All right. Let me run through some of the comments so that nobody, because I like the engagement. Nandifa says, perfect, Dr. Miriam. So she's agreeing with you. Regina Helen believes that we all believe in the power of sport to build confidence, self-esteem, and resilience to overcome challenges and speak up against gender-based violence. It's high time we encourage our daughters to participate in sports from a young age to build these attributes so that they are able to speak up in schools, clubs, or community setup. All right, so that's what Regina was saying. Sorry, Fran Hilton Smith says Kosafa football. Yeah, I know Fran Hilton Smith. Oh, such an amazing woman with great achievements. She's talking about Kosafa now, that they conduct leadership courses in 14,000 countries to empower women leaders. Fourth year now. So it's a great idea. Knowledge is power. Let me run through this. Nelly Odera says this is a very informative session. This is greeting us. I don't know that flag. I think I'm ashamed. Um, some Lydia is saying, enjoying every bit of this conversation. I love this. And she's following all the way from Kenya. Joan is talking about the verification of gender-based cases. I think I've read her message. Um, let's see which message I haven't read. Kedogo Evelyn is saying, I'm locked in all the way from Kenya. So Camillus is saying, I'm rooting for more of these conversations, especially in the rural areas. We need to get these conversations in our home settings. And Stacey Gatchery says, great topic. I'm happy to see that we are talking about it. And so we have all these conversations going on from across Africa. I want to thank every single one of you. You have been amazing. Can we now wrap up with redress? And then we'll come to you, Dr. Miriam. We'll come to you because this is an amazing platform, the African Women in Sports Initiative. So we'll wrap up on this conversation and then you just talk to us about the initiative and what we are really trying to achieve before we close. But let's talk about redress. This understanding gender-based violence, the redress of this situation. We've spoken prevention, we've spoken prevention, we've spoken protection, and now let's talk about redress. Just very briefly too, because we are really out of time.
Okay, in terms of redress, redress means just returning a person where they are from.
Yeah.
And I'll just briefly say that part of the redress is when the federations issue formal apologies. They show accountability of what is happening. They take action against the players, providing psychosocial support and also financial compensation.
All right. And I think somebody here is talking about redress too. Regina Akufodako says, I think the issue is not just about having the desk or the committee, but seeing results of some of such cases. This is because the more cases are thrown under the carpet, others will not be encouraged to report their case. And Grace Kiraguri says, we have he said, "Do we have any She was asking if we have any culprits from Kenya that have been prosecuted, apart from the high profiles of prominent athletes, or are they confidentially solved?" This is a deep question because when we are talking about redress, we have to talk about this. Or apart from the cases that the high profile cases, are there other small cases that happen? And if they are, why are they confidentially resolved? Why are they not also openly resolved to deter other people from doing this?
I think it comes to the issue of shame. A lot of the persons affected are harassed to the effect that they don't want it to be public. Another thing is that the structures in place are not confidential and are not um, are not really respected. And another big challenge that will make me answering this question difficult in terms of cases that are reported, they would register the complainant as female. So, in terms of criminal sanctions, I would not have the data to show how many female athletes cases that people have been held accountable. So I'll just reiterate and say that we need to make sure that there are proper functioning systems within the federations to investigate. But also another thing, we now need to work on data so that we are able to give the proper statistics.
Diana, I have a question for you. Huh? Sorry, Tega,
Yes.
I'm usurping your power.
That's okay.
I'm ready for the fine. Diana, there's a time on our WhatsApp group for Awisi. There was this case of this young athlete who was, I think she was violated, and her case was put on social media. And one
Mhm.
of the things I remember us discussing is whether does it help, as much as I know that gender-based violence is more about, it also has the element of speaking out. But one of my questions then was, is it safe for women who have gone through gender gender-based violence to keep to have their videos recorded and spread all over social media? Does it really help the victim? Does it protect the victim, or what do you think about that? Because at some point I felt a bit of a concern that if this video keeps circulating, and maybe the victim could be even in more danger. I don't know what your comments are
Yeah, yeah,
about.
and yeah. So Diana, you can answer that, and Patricia, you can also
I,
answer that for the
I,
psychology of the person involved.
yes. When you
After Diana,
circulate,
Patricia.
yeah, when you circulate the videos, you're not helping the victims at all. It's like holy gossip when someone wants to pray for you in church, but they're really telling on what the sins you have done. When you expose the information, first you've breached the right to privacy of the survivor. You're further disempowering her, and also you're affecting the investigation. So even if the police begin the investigation, the perpetrator now is aware that there are people after him and may now take action, which includes killing. In my previous job, though it was not GBV, when information was circulated about against a certain police officer, the victim suddenly started dying. So that is exposure. But what can we do? How can we correct it? If you come across the video, if it amounts to a criminal action, report it to the police station, or find a reliable or responsible duty bearer who can pick up on the case. Another thing that you have to know, that a lot of these videos that go around might not have probative value, because the rules of evidence will still apply. So even if you circulate it, it actually makes it harder for the investigators to pinpoint the origin. And it's very difficult to rely on that information in court. The next thing, we still, most of us in Africa, live in our society, the women's integrity is seen as high up. It is not right, but we are still in that society. So you might be affecting the ability of this lady to continue living in her society, causing further isolation and also psychological harm. So what I would beg is, please, 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 either go to the police or a duty bearer, but please do not expose the survivor into further shame, into further intimidation, into further revictimization. Thank you.
Okay, anything to add, Patricia? Or I should just move on to the next question because questions are coming. Patricia?
You can move to the next question.
Okay, so let's come to the next question now. Farouk Mansur says, great discussion. Wondering how these conversations can get to those of us in the countryside without connectivity. Now, this question is not even psychological, it's just talking about communication. How do we get these conversations to the rural areas where there are no internet connectivity?
We can start small. Remember I was saying how we start these conversations in small places around us, at home, in schools, in churches. So if every person in this live, you've gotten some information and you can spread it to someone else, we do that and then grow from the grassroots before we get to the offices and the boardrooms where policies are being created.
I haven't
Uh,
heard from Irene in a while.
I
Irene, are
can
you still here? Irene?
I,
Okay, Irene is no longer here. Sorry, doctor, you wanted to add something?
yes, I wanted to respond to the gentleman who asked about
Okay, yes, the question
yes,
about communication. How do we spread
yes.
it to the rural area?
Yes, one of the things that we want to do at Awisi is that we'd like to partner with communities and organization and individuals to be able to educate or train some of the, key persons within those particular groups, so that they can be able now to go to places like those and reach out and also train other people, because I believe that in as much as there might be uh, spaces where there is no internet, there are leaders there. So we are going to try and reach out to communities where there's no internet, partner with people like like Diana here and Patricia, who have expertise in GBV, and be able to train, even if it's one person per village, or it can be able to help, spread this information and help in prevention and redress of GBV. Thank you.
These are so much conversations just coming in through. Let me take some comments from those of us that are listening. Um, Fran is telling us well done. Samba Jumba is saying great conversation. I'm listening in from Kenya. Rachel Stanley says circulating video is similar to gossip. This must stop as soon as possible. And Fran also says support staff must be women. All right, so those are the comments we have. On that note, let's just take I want to thank every single person, Diana. I want to thank you, Dr. Yera. I want to thank you, Patricia. I want to thank Irene, who had to struggle to come through um, to bring this conversation on understanding gender based violence, protection, prevention, and redress. I want to thank everybody that has joined us for sending their comments and sending their message. All right. But let's hear right now from Dr. Miriam. She's the president of this great association, Africa Women in Sports Initiative. It is the initiative that has brought all of us from across Africa onto this platform. Let's talk about what we are doing at the Africa Women in Sports Initiative and what we hope to see from us in the future. Let's just wrap up with that before we finally call it a day.
Tega, thank you very much for beautifully moderating this session. And of course, the speakers, we could go on about this topic for, I think, the next 4 hours or even months, because it is something that we hold dear to us as women. We do not want to see this happening, because GBV generally slows us down. It slows women down. It slows communities down. It slows even men down, because there are how many men are being jailed for killing women, or violating women's rights, and that slows down the men in terms of also their progress. So really, it is not a vice that is helping anyone at all. And I must say that the insights today are just, they're just a tip on the iceberg. And I believe that if we can continue with these conversations, we are definitely going to be making greater contributions to society. And I also want to just conclude by saying that uh, we hope that we can run campaigns, and partner with organizations. Let's continue running campaigns, because the more we speak out, the more we educate, young people, the more we educate, the more we involve men, the better. And again, the speakers talked about having services like counseling, having services like safe spaces, and creating desks where women can be able to go and feel safe about talking about these issues and trying to find solutions. And I believe that, again, if I must emphasize, is that and I know Dr. Yara knows this, that when a woman is empowered, then she has a lot of power even to say no to certain things in society, even to say no within her home. Because you can imagine, if you're just a housewife at home, you don't have an education background, you don't have any sort of power that you have other than just maybe being in the kitchen, which is not a bad thing. But if you don't have a voice, you are not able to even speak to your sons, or even speak to your husband, or speak to your uncles, or the men around you, to be able to say, look here, if we could take care of the girls like this. So every woman out there needs a voice. And if you're empowered enough, it can be able to you can be able to have one voice that makes great change. And another thing, of course, is one of the things that makes women who are in situations of gender-based violence retreat and recoil and even make the situation worse, is not believing them. So even if it's a young girl who has come to you and says, look here, mom, this happened to me, the first thing that we can always do is exercise uh, that compassion and believe that, look here, I believe you. And rather than being judgmental, I know that sometimes when maybe there's this trend that came up because I think women were being accused, or women are being accused of dressing improperly, because then it makes the men want to rape you or sexually abuse you, whatever it is. And so then you'll find that you find yourself as a woman facing a young girl who's dressed indecently, and probably she's telling you how this has happened to her. And then the first time you'll be, you might lose it and judge her according to her dress, and you'll be like, maybe you caused it. And I think that at some point we have to find the compassion to know that no one really wants to be sexually abused. No one wants to be violated. And therefore we need to exercise compassion, and not be judgmental, and create safe spaces as we empower also the young girls and women within our communities about this vice. So at Awis, our biggest agenda really is to be able to bring forums like this to the public, where we can have discussions, and not just about gender-based violence, but other topics. But also we want to empower women. We want to have trainings where we can be able to have this information at our fingertips. We have so many women who are so resourceful in African Women Sports Initiative. It's just amazing, Tega. The level of women who are on that group are, out of this world. And we want to tap into that resource to be able to make the world of sports a balanced industry, an industry where both men and women will enjoy and excel and reach their potential. And that's one of our biggest dreams at Awisi. And I must say that we are looking forward to launching our platform on 12th April in Nairobi. And we hope that everybody can be able to, all the women can be able to join this launch, and be able to understand the strategies and the plans and programs that the women on the committees are really working hard to bring forth to. And I believe that once we launch the platform, we are going to take off, like a beautiful bird that is well balanced, and we'll be able to do all these things that we want to do and aspire to do. So
Yeah.
without much ado, I really appreciate everybody who's listening in on us, and all the speakers for the contributions, and the committee behind the scenes who are making this happen, Sombua and Patricia from the events committee. Thank you so much, ladies. We look forward to continuing these conversations and interacting with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Miriam. She's the president of Africa Women in Sports Initiative, and she just told us all the many things they're going to do. But first of all, I also want to thank these important people, these special people that keep sending in their messages from Facebook, from YouTube, from LinkedIn, from different platforms. Kelvin at Blago says, great conversation listening from Ghana. Joan Nicole says, great insights. Um, Nandiva Nandi says, suggestion, I think Dr. Miriam touched a very important issue when she says all team managers should do counseling training course. And I like that takeaway. Stacy Gatcheri says, kindly send some notes if possible. She doesn't just want this, this broadcast. She wants to take it home. And then Cover says, brilliant initiative. Want to thank everybody that sent their message into the program. Want to thank every single speaker here. You did an amazing job. And for me, the summary is everything we have discussed here. I hope we can all take it to our different desks, in Kenya, in Ghana, in Botswana, in South Africa, in Nigeria, everywhere that we are, and we can start to implement some of these things. So thank every single person for speaking on the program, and thank you so much, everybody working behind the scenes, our able producer, Simbue. You are, as in you have done an amazing job directing. And once again, this was Africa Women in Sports Initiative Virtual Forum. We were hosting Understanding Gender-Based Violence, Protection, Prevention, and Redress. Hope we're able to touch on every aspect you wanted to learn about. And you have any questions, you can send to us on our various platforms. On that note, we say thank you so much for watching. Thank you for joining us, and have a fantastic evening.